Okay, I told I told the, obviously the in-person classes this today, but I'm going to go through this paper with you guys a little bit today. Instead of having you watch the video of the actual like recorded class session, I figured this would be a little bit easier, maybe even a little bit faster for you. So for this set of notes, I believe I put it in your packet for on supply pickup day. But a couple years ago, as I began teaching this unit, I wanted to make more of a study tool for students to be able to use to prepare for the classification test. Obviously, there are a lot of new words and classification names that we're not familiar with, so I wanted to make something that would kind of help with that. And I've called this document multiple things over the years, either picture cards or invertebrate phyla cards, lots of different things. But anyway, basically I used pictures of the animals to help make the words in hopes that it would give you guys kind of a visual of what's going on here. So first of all, you have the annelids. Obviously, these are the ringed segmented worms. So we have the worm here making the shape of the L. And then below them, we're going to write the characteristics for each one of them. So first, we're going to say that annelids are invertebrates. Characteristics is that they have this ringed segmented worms. And then our two main examples are earthworms and leeches. I went ahead and underlined the examples just to kind of set them apart from the rest of the characteristics there. Then next we have the roundworms. We didn't really get to talk about this exactly in class, but one of the main examples for roundworms is a hookworm, which is why you see the little hooks here on his mouth. And they actually use those kind of hooks or teeth to kind of like latch on to the intestinal wall of the organism. And that's what they kind of feed off of, their parasites. So roundworms are invertebrate. We talked about how the scientific name for that is also nematodes. Our main example is a hookworm. And then we also mentioned how they outnumber every other animal on Earth. So I'm going to go pretty fast through this, but if you need to pause at any point in time and write things down, go ahead and do that. Next, we have the cnidarians. I used a jellyfish, tried to kind of squish it up and make it look like an N for the CN, the N for cnidarians. They are invertebrate. They have stinging tentacles to stun the food and then pull it up into their mouth. And our two main examples are jellyfish and polyp. Next, we have the flatworms. We talked about how they have long, flat bodies, kind of like a tape measure, which is why I used a tape measure to represent the letter L. They are also invertebrates. They have long, flat bodies. Most of them are parasites. And then our three main examples are tapeworm, planaria, and liver flukes. Going on to the next one, we have sponges. Sponges are invertebrates. The other thing we talked about with sponges is how they get their food. They filter food out of the water as it flows through them, kind of like a strainer, almost like you would use when cooking pasta or rice or something at home. Next, we have the mollusks. These are also invertebrate, meaning they don't have a backbone. Characteristic of these animals is they have soft bodies that are usually covered by a hard shell. We also talked about how there are two types of mollusks, land mollusks that have lungs, and then water mollusks that do not. So land mollusks are going to be things like snails and slugs, while water mollusks are more like clams, oysters, and then octopus and squid. We talked about how they actually do belong in the mollusk group, even though they don't actually have a shell or a hard covering. They're in a special group of mollusks called cephalopods. It's kind of fun to say. Next, we have the echinoderms. These are the invertebrate animals. Characteristically, they have the spiny skin. Remember, I keep saying that echinoderm is supposed to remind you of spiny skin. Three main examples would be starfish, sea cucumber, and sea urchin. And I have the sea cucumber here representing the I, and then the starfish representing the O for echinoderm. Then we have the arthropods, also invertebrate. They have an exoskeleton or a hard covering on the outside of their bodies, as well as jointed appendages, meaning jointed arms or legs. They don't move like this, right? They actually can use those joints to flex and move around and things like that. And then we talked about how there are 3 groups. Insects, which 2 examples would be ants and butterflies. Crustaceans, 2 examples would be crab and lobster. And then arachnids with scorpion and spider. So obviously I have the lobster here forming the T for arthropod, the butterfly forming the O, and then the spider forming the other O as well. Alright, moving on to the vertebrate category. I couldn't really use the bird for anything, so he's just perching on top of the S, but they are vertebrate animals. They're warm-blooded. Then we talked about what kind of body covering they have. They're covered by feathers. And then how do they reproduce? Obviously they come from eggs. We know all animals come from eggs, but birds specifically hatch from hard-shelled eggs. And then our 2 main examples, flamingo and toucan. Next we have the amphibians. Obviously we have the frog here kind of forming the circle part of the P, and then the salamander forming the S for amphibians. They are vertebrate animals. They're cold-blooded, which means their body temperature is dependent on the surroundings. They have a smooth, slimy skin covering. They hatch from soft-shelled eggs. And then 2 examples are salamander and frog. Similarly, we have the reptiles. I like this one especially because the crocodile, that curved crocodile, makes the top part of the R pretty nicely. And then the turtle makes the E. So they are also vertebrate, cold-blooded. They have dry, rough, scaly skin as opposed to the amphibian smooth, slimy skin. They also hatch from soft-shelled eggs. Could be a few exceptions. And then 4 examples would be crocodile, alligator, turtle, and tortoise. I also told the other classes, someone asked what's the difference between a turtle and a tortoise. A turtle spends time both on water and in land, while tortoise is mostly land. And then lastly, we have the mammals. I have the camel here, the double hump showing the double hump of the M, and then the lion, and then I have the monkey kind of hanging off over there on the S. So the camel forms the M, and then the A represents the A. Or no, the lion represents the A. These are vertebrate animals. Obviously, they have a backbone. They are warm-blooded, meaning body temperature stays the same no matter what the environment is. They have hair or fur covering their body. They are born alive. They are not hatched. We do know they still come from eggs, but egg cells. And then main examples, human, tiger, lion, and elephant. Yeah, obviously, we want to make sure we have the human in there. That's where we belong. And then lastly, we have fish. I have just the regular fish forming the bottom bar of the F there. And then the shark is kind of forming the top curve of the S. So they are vertebrate, cold-blooded, which is why they have to swim to warmer areas or even swim up to shallower water to warm up. They have scales as well as a kind of slimy mucus covering their body. They hatch from soft-shelled eggs. And then 2 examples would be shark and salmon. I just want to quickly point out, some of my students were saying, Miss Rustling, shark is not actually a vertebrae because it has cartilage and not any actual bone. While that's true, the cartilage is still what forms the body structure or support inside of the body. So because their main structural mechanism, even though it's not actually bone, it's still cartilage, right? But it still gives them their shape. And because that's on the inside of their body as opposed to the outside, like an exoskeleton, it still classifies them as a vertebrae, even though it's not technically true bone, it's more cartilage. So once you've written down all the characteristics, you're welcome to color them. For the remaining couple minutes of class today, I had the students color them as they please, but these are just, they kind of work like flashcards just to help you study. Hopefully the visuals give you a good reminder of what class or phylum, the group the animals belong in. A good way to study these would be to have a sibling or a parent or whoever maybe studies with you either ask you to give them the phylum name and they list off the characteristics, or have them mention the name and you have to give off the characteristics for that phylum group. So either way, these are going to be on your test, so hopefully this is helpful for you.